Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Trade Academy. Our topic today will be on Trendline and how to use it. For those who don't know what Trendline is a tool that helps in predicting price movement. So, retail traders like us make use of Trendline. When you look at this illustration here, you can see that the price of this chart, of this drawing, is going where? Downward. So when connecting your trend line, you have to draw your trend line in the direction of what you are seeing on the chart. You can see the connect your trend line downward. So whenever we have a touch, we trade in that direction. Whenever we have a touch, we trade in that direction. So take for instance, we have price in this movement. So you have to connect your trend line in an upward direction. So each time we have a touch, we trade back in that upward direction. Now let's go to our chart. When you look at these candles, what do you see? We see the candles going in this direction. We see the candles going in this direction. That means the market is in a downtrend. So when you want to connect your trend line, we can connect it from the high point there, at least a touch of 2. A touch of 2 from there. You can see we have a touch of 2. We have a touch of 1, 2. So at this third touch, when price comes to this, to touch the trend line, we do what? Look for a confirmatory entry and we sell in the direction of the trend, and we stand to make profit. So each time price touches the trend line, we trade back in that direction. Same apply to this. So when you look at this, you can see, when you look at this chart, you can see that the candles are going upward. So when connecting your trend line, we connect it to touch the candles, the down parts, acting as a support zone. So whenever we have a touch, we buy. Whenever we have a touch, we buy. Whenever we have a touch, we buy. Now, that is one way to use the trend line. Now, this was my last week trade on break and retest. You can see clearly that I connected my trend line upward in the direction of these candles, and I was able to buy at it whenever the candles touches my trend line. I was able to buy. Now look at what happened here. What actually happened here? Let me zoom. At the break of this trend line, what happened? We see candle breaking this trend line. So the second way to use this trend line is to use it for break and retest. So now we can see candles breaking our trend line. Now it comes back to retest the area of that trend line. Sometimes it might not touch it, but in as much as you have seen this candle coming close to it, you do what? You pick your sell trade and you stand to make this huge profit when it finally sells. So, and I also used it on GDP USD last week. I was able to connect my trend line. Mind you, whenever you are connecting your trend line, 2 touches is enough. So we can see the market in this scenario. You can see it breaking our trend line. This is not break and retest. It only broke the trend line and then zoom up. So break and retest is when it comes, breaks this trend line. You can see the break here, how it broke this trend line, came back to retest it. Let me zoom in. You can see how it broke the trend line, came back to retest it. Then what happened? The market sold. So this is what I mean by break and retest. Euro USD, this is a correct break and a retest. This is a clean sign for you to sell in the direction of the breakout. In the direction of what? Of this breakout, we sell. Same thing happened to GDP USD last week. Once you have connected your trend line, you have a 2 touches and you have a breakout. This is false breakout. Until when you have a breakout like this and a retest on your trend line, you do what? You sell and you stand to make huge profit. Now, how do you connect your trend line? To connect your trend line, what you have to do is to zoom in just like this, so that you can see whatever reactions the candles are forming on your chart. So once you have zoomed in completely like this, you'll be able to see that the market is actually going up. So when you are connecting your trend line, you connect from the bottoms of from the bottom of that low, so that you can have a perfect touch. So when I want to connect this my trend line, I can decide to pick it from here, connecting from that low. So my main focus is to have 2 touches. This is the first touch and this is the second touch. So I know it didn't touch this. This one broke out. It's not my major concern. My major concern is to have 2 touches. Then you extend your trend line. Now look at this. Whenever price comes to touch it, it bounces up. So this is where you place your buy trade. We can also see what happened here. Market came to create a false breakout. Many people will start looking to sell, but do not forget that the trend is what? The trend line is up. So we can buy more to stand to make profit. So we keep buying. You can see another false breakout. We keep buying in as much as this trend line has not been broken. Now, how do we know when a trend line is broken? That is when we have a breakout and a retest. So this is a breakout and a retest. So whenever this has happened, that is when we start thinking of drawing our next trend line. Whenever we experience breakout and retest, that is when we draw the next trend line in this form. I have 2 touches, my first and second touches. Now what do you see? We see price coming close to the trend line, but did not touch it, but sold. In as much as you are trading back into the direction of your trend line, we keep making profit. Now look at this area. What do you see? We see candles going downward. So when connecting your trend line, connect it downwards. You connect it touching at the back of it, touching the candles. So when price comes here for another touch, we do what? We sell back in the direction of the trend. That is how to use. So sometimes this trend line, we just have to keep connecting them, and they might not be that perfect, but we just have to keep connecting them to allow us trade in line with the trend. But our main focus is when you see this breakout, don't rush into selling. We are still buying because the trend is what? Is up. So we are still buying. The only condition that will warrant selling is when we have a real breakout from your trend line and a retest. Then we do what? We sell.